Alright, multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Again, this word ratio is in there, so we're talking about fractions. Unfortunately, fractions are not going to stay as easy as you see here. But fortunately, the concept is going to be just as easy as it was when we did this. And then we're going to apply it to ones that don't look quite as pretty, with full of x's and things like that. So, the very first thing you learned with multiplying fractions was that you could multiply them straight across. Multiply the tops, the numerators, multiply the bottoms, the denominators. So 2 times 5 is 10, and 3 times 7 is 21. Easy as that. Now, secondly, you learned that you can also simplify before you multiply to make it easier, and you don't have to simplify as much as at the end. Because this 3 and this 9 have something in common. It's called cross-canceling. And because 3 goes into 3 one time, and 3 goes into 9 3 times, it's because that 3 that we took out of both top and bottom, 3 and 3, 3 divided by 3 makes 1. And the 10 and the 20 also have something in common. They have the 10 in common. When you take a 10 out of a 10, it leaves a 1. And 20 divided by 10 is 2. And now you take the leftovers and multiply those straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is 6. Now, had you multiplied and got 30, multiplied 20 times 9, you could have reduced it to 1 over 6, and you get the same exact answer. Now, dividing. Dividing is very, very similar to multiplying. If you think dividing by 2 makes a number smaller, dividing by 1/2 is actually the same thing as multiplying by 2 and making the number bigger. So dividing, you multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. So 2/3 divided by 6/5 is the same thing as 2/3 times 5 over 6. And now the same process applies. So 2 and 6 have something in common. It's a 1. And that leaves a 3, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. And we multiply straight across. 1 times 5 is 5. 3 times 3 is 9. So you get 5 9ths. So, when we take and do this with x's, weird things happen. The key thing to remember is that we had a 2 over a 2 up here. And so in a sense we had 2 times 5 and 3 times, and the 6 was made up of a 2 times the 3. Why we got what we did was the 2 and the 2 crossed out, because 2 divided by 2 is 1. They were common factors, and so we can cross out common factors because they're multiplied. Key thing about factors is that they're multiplied, but some things that we want to do are things like crossing out these x squared because there's an x squared on top and an x squared on the bottom. Don't do this. Not right at all. We don't want to cross out x squareds because they are added, or adding a negative down here on the bottom, and they are not common factors. We want everything to be multiplied, and so the rule of today would be factor, factor, factor. So, what multiplies to the 4 and adds to the 4? 2 and 2. So we're going to factor the top into x plus 2 and x plus 2. In the bottom, what multiplies to the 6, negative 6, and what adds to the negative 1? 2 and 3, 6 and 1, but we want it to add to a negative 1, so I'm going to choose this 2 and negative 3. X plus 2, x minus 3. And so now we have common factors on top and on bottom. So we can cross out our x plus 2, because x plus 2 divided by x plus 2 is 1. And so we're left with x plus 2 over x minus 3. Alright, So in our next one, it's going to look very, very similar to what we did prior in last chapters. Everything in this problem is multiplied. Even though there's a multiplication in front of, we're multiplying two fractions, but there's still multiplication in here, multiplication when we write things next to each other. And so none of this is going to be a problem because it's all multiplication. 120 divided by 5. What do they have in common? Well, they both have 5. 5 goes into 5 once, and 5 goes into 120 24 times. So I know we're going to have a 24. What else do we have in common? Well, we've got 5 x's on top here, x to the 5th and x to the 3rd. So this x to the 3rd is going to be completely crossed out because there's 2 more x's up here. 5 minus 3 is 2, so we have an x squared up there. And then with the y's, we've got 4 y's down here, but only 1 y up top, so this 1 y is going to cross cancel with this y to the 4th. And 3 of them are going to be left, because y to the 4th divided by y is y cubed. So now you just have to look closely to find all your leftovers. We got 24. We had x squared times x, so that's going to be x cubed. And y cubed, this canceled out, so we just have y cubed on the bottom. So that was a little bit of review. As we look to number 2 here, remember the rule of the day? Factor, factor, factor. So, don't forget the very basic kind of factoring. We only have 2 terms here, but they both have an x in them. So, take out the x, and you get x plus 3 left. On the bottom, we have what multiplies to 8 and adds to 6. 2 and 4, 8 and 1, 2 and 4 is going to be the winner. So x plus 2, x plus 4, because 4 times 2 is 8, and then we're going to get a 4x and a 2x, and that'll multiply back into our 6x. Remember that when you factor, you can always double check your work real quick by foiling it out. Factoring is just the opposite of FOIL. X squared plus x minus 2. So what multiplies to a negative 2 and adds to a positive 1 this time? So we get 2 and 1. We need a positive 2 and a negative 1 to add to a positive 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So x plus 2, x minus 1. And we've got another 2-termer in here, a binomial. And so we have a 4 and a 12, so we can take out a 4. We have an x cubed and an x squared, and we can take out the biggest one there, get an x squared out. So the 4 is gone, 2 of the x's are gone, that leaves 1x. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and x squared divided by x squared, we took it out, so no x's left. This next part is my favorite part, because you look for every single thing you can cancel out. X plus 3 divided by x plus 3 is 1. X plus 2 divided by x plus 2 is 1. Those are going to have to stay, but then this x and this x have an x in common, so I'm going to cross out one of them, and so this x squared is no longer an x squared. And so crossed out, crossed out, crossed out. We've got x minus 1 divided by, and I usually like to write the 4x out in front because it looks a little cleaner, and I just leave it in factored form. Don't worry about multiplying it out. So, factor, 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 factor. I can't say it enough. Factor. And then, once you've factored everything, cross out your common factors. And then what don't we do? Don't feel the temptation to cross out your x squared and your x squared when they're only added together. Only cross out when there's multiplication, because they're only common factors when there's multiplication.